Okay, so good. We're up to Zimun Kuf Tzadi Gimel Halacha Beis. We'll do Beis and Gimel today, Mr. Shem. Some very interesting halachas. We're continuing our working through the halachas of Zimun, and we're going to be talking about later on about when you do a Zimun. Do you do a Zimun on a plane, on a train, if you're in a car, all these sort of situations. But let's do Beis first. Says the Mechaber, Afilu lo hukbu mitchila kulam. Even if they weren't kovea to eat together, but two of them decided to sit down to eat together, and then a third person came and joined them, or one was kovea to sit and eat there, and then two people joined him. They can't split. Because at the end of the day, come the end of the meal, i.e., come Birchas Hamazon, they've now got a kvias, and therefore they've got to do a zimun. Nevertheless, if he's eating with them below keva, rishoyim lechalek. In other words, if the third guy is just sort of nushing and is not really sort of sitting with them, then that's not called a kvias, and they're really considered two, and therefore they can split. Elim keinu shamish, unless he's the shamish, because the shamish doesn't have any kvias. Whenever they're permitted to split, it's better that they don't and they actually do a zimun. Why? Because if the more the people they are together, then the better it is. Okay, it says in Mishnah Berurah Yudches, Shashnaim kavu. So you've got two people who are sitting down to bekvias to eat a meal, and one person joins them. So that works. Kvias nikra, so the Mishnah Berurah Sifkat in Yudches, Kvias nikra k'sheyeshvim va'oichlim al shulchan echad. Where they say, what is a kvias? Now this is the big question. How do you define three people sitting eating together? So he says they're sitting and eating on one table, or with one in one sort of setting, tablecloth. Yeah, you can imagine you're sitting in a park, but there's one tablecloth that everyone's sitting there eating together. Even if each one is eating their own sandwich, their own loaf of bread, they're not eating from a communal or from a shared serving pot. It doesn't matter, so long as there's this one table, one sitting, that's enough. The if you've got a family sitting together eating, that's called the kviyas, even though there's not one shulchan. Now in 18, he says something very interesting. What if you're sitting in a restaurant or you're in a hotel, and I'm sitting on one table, the next guy's sitting on another table? Is that called the kviyas? So listen to what he says. He says in 18, V'lochein shloisha sheyoshim b'malon or b'misada al shulchan echad afilu shleiskavnu le'echol yachad. They weren't planning. I just happened to, I'm passing and I want some lunch or whatever it is. Ha-shulchan mitzarfen zimun. The shulchan joins them together. Yeah, but if they're different tables, not. So it's one shulchan is what's mitzarfen them together. Omnom. Omnom im hoipich paneim b'shas achila zelekan v'zelekan cause of das Torah sheyesh lemesheim is starting zimun. But if we're sitting in a restaurant and the three of us, let's say three of us sit down together, and we aren't planning on eating together, but we all happen just to bump into each other and we sit down together, then that's a zimun because the table is mitzvah of us. But if you're sitting reading your paper facing that way, and I'm eating my lunch, and then they're not. So it's not necessarily in the shulchan. It depends on the kavanah if we're sort of, we're being mitzaref as well. But generally speaking, the shulchan is mitzaref us, unless, everyone's sort of facing different directions and not talking to each other, then they're not. That seems to be the conclusion.
Surely a hotel's more of a kviz than a restaurant, because a hotel people could be staying there for a week together.
Yeah, but the meal, am I sitting together? Am I having lunch with you? If you're sitting reading your newspaper in one end of the table, and I'm not talking to you, I'm just sitting looking at, the back of the cereal packet, then maybe not. Okay, let's go weiter. Bigmar ha'achila. So the Mechaber had said if you've got two people, and then a third guy comes along and he joins them at some point, that's enough, because of the Gemara Achila, that's a kviyas. Says the Mishnah Berurah Yudches, Chol alayhu chayvas zimun al yedei zeh she'ochlu b'soif b'yachad. There's it's chal on them, the chiyuv to do mizaman, since they all were together at the end. Mashma mizeh Holla im loy gamru gam b'seif achila b'yachad kagoin shebo echad lechol etz shnayim achar shekvai schila lechol v'gam gamru sudasen shlo bizman echad, or they finished separately. Oisen shegamru mikaydim rishon levarich b'fnei atzon. Those who've already finished, they don't have to wait for this new guy to show up and to eat and to whatever. They can split, because why? You need at least the beginning or the end to be together, and you haven't got anything here. The guy came later, and you want to leave early, so you haven't got the beginning or the end, which is biyachad. However, if he's sitting there waiting, and the third guy now finishes whatever he's eating, then you can't leave. Even though I had finished 10 minutes earlier, but I'm now sitting there still whilst he's finishing his eating. As long as I'm sitting there, and if they would bring me some more food, I might eat it. Then we treat it as if they're finished together. Okay, so that's that happens fairly often. Imagine you're sitting down, you've got a Shabbos meal, and there are two men there, and halfway through the meal, a neighbor pops in and sits, and he has a piece of cake, and even though you finished eating, since you could have more food in the at the end of the meal, the fact that he's sitting there having a piece of cake, then that's mitzvah for you that you could do therefore a zimun. Okay, Mikol Mokum Sif Cotton Chof Hu Kamei Avol. The Mikol Mokum is read as Avol, but so you read it. However, Im Yochel Imoim Beloy Keva Rishayim Lechalik. Fine. Beloy Keva. What does that mean? Sif Cotton Chaf Aleph. Haynu Sheloi Ochlu Bederech Keva BeYeshiva Al Shulchan Echad V'Al Shulchan Echad V'Afilu Hischilu Lechol B'Shleishim Et Chilas Hasuda V'Ad Soifa. Even if they began to eat together from the beginning to the end. Who shamash, unless it's a shamash. Why? Because the way of his eating is not bekvius. Like he's running around. And therefore that is just the nature of how he eats it. And therefore the shamash, even though he's not being kaver and sitting down with you, he is mitzdarif with you, because that's just the nature of how he eats. Says the Ramah, then you should do it. Hainu she'ochla shleisha beloy kvias v'chein esrim b'shish or 20 or 6 afal pish din rishona, even though they're able to split. So you've got 20 people or you've got 6 people, they technically could split. However, odif tfei sheloi lechali mikol makom odif tfei sheloi lechali, it's better they don't split. Why? Because the Ramah explained, because v'reivam hadras melech, says the Mishnah Berurah, ayin b'mogen Avram shehikshet v'harbe paiskim mashmal in shleisha she'ochlu beloy keva the ain't echod yochel lahitzi chaver bebrichas hamazon u'mimele gam in zimun ein rishayim, and so too without the zimun ein rishayim v'ayin sham she'erich b'zeh v'after yesh achreinim she'dochur ayosel in zimun mikol makom yosem mistabek kidvar v'chem primogodim kosev gam kein the makom she'ein echod yochel lahitzi chaver bebrichas hamazon. When one person is not sufficient, you can't be moitzi the other person in benching. Im yochelim is started in the zimun sarchi in the ma'ase. It's sarchian if you can do a zimun together. Or mesayim the ba'asar sheish askaras Hashem efshet the also the kula alma lezamin be'bein chayovin v'chein mash b'chayodim klal memches din zayin. Therefore, for 3, there's no major harm in it. There's no harm in doing it. But if there's 10 where you're saying Elokeinu, that should be avoided unless you're absolutely clear. Okay, let's just do Gimel. So the very interesting halacha. If they're riding on, in those days, on donkeys, on horses, v'oimru, and then one of them says, okay, noichal, let's stop, let's eat. Even though there are 3 of them, at least, they're riding on a donkey, they're traveling, and they say, okay, let's just stop for lunch. Then, even though each person is eating from his own packed lunch, then they're not eating together from a shared serving dish. Mitzdarfin, they can join together to do a zimun. Kivin she'omdu b'makom echad, because they've stopped in one place. But if they continue journeying, then not. They've got to stop in that place. They're sitting in a field. Everyone is all over the place. They're just different places. So if each one takes a bit of a loaf of bread and he goes to that corner, he goes to that corner, that's not called a tziruf to do a zimun. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Let's just do the Mishnah Berurah till there. Kilshenim mamish muva le'el b'siman kuf samach zayin sifyud base. For those with a good memory, it's almost exactly the same as the halachas of Birchas Hamazon that we mentioned back in Kuf Samach Zayin Sif base, Yud base. And the Sham Ma'arid in Halohisi Birchas Hamazon. There, the issue was if three people on the back of a horse, can one person be Moitzi the other person in the Brach of Hamoitzi? For Hacha Ma'arid in Sif Zimun. Here, we're at the other end of the meal. We're talking about tziruf joining them together for zimun. V'din echad l'shneim, but the same halachas apply. V'kvar bi'atzi sham mishabura be'er heitev ayin sham. And I explained it all over there. Chavvav holchim v'oichlim loy. But if they're continuing their journey, they're not mitzaref. V'yoshvin ba'agola. Now, that's if they're on a horse. If they're traveling on a horse, they're not mitzaref. V'yoshvin ba'agola. If they're in the back of a cart, v'oichlim b'yachad kashem noisin, and they're all sitting on the back of a wagon, eating together. Ayin b'siman kuf zamach zayin, mashe kosafti b'shem hamogen Avram, shem mistapik b'zeh, v'chaya odem ichriya b'zeh, v'chein b'chol mokum sheish sofik, b'shleishi yizamnu. Whenever there's a sofik, you're not sure if this is a zimun, 3, do it. It's okay. And err on the side of caution and don't do it when you've got 10, because you might be saying the Shem Hashem levatola. But you can bench without the Shem Hashem. You can mention it even b'di'evet if you didn't mention the Shem Hashem even with 10, and that would be okay. Okay, let's see 2 interesting footnotes. The first one is 24. So in a wagon, we said, we just said in a wagon, he's mistapik. Are they joining together, yes or no? So he says in a ship, Kosov Le'el, in Birchas Hamoitzi, Sheposhet, She'af Le'mogen Avram, it's starting Shekvis Gmuri. In a ship, you're all on a rowing boat. You're on a ship together. For sure you're mitzaref. And that's not the same as a wagon. V'chein Kosov Orach HaShulchan. So what's the difference? Why a ship, yes, you're mitzaref, and a nagola, the back of a wagon, you're not? So Kosov b'Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Shulchan Aruch Harav explains, Shesfina eina chashuva k'mahaleches. A sfina in Lomdus is not moving anywhere. Why? Ela hamayim holchim tachteho. It's just that the water underneath it is moving. And I'm just sort of floating on the water. It's the water underneath me is moving. That's how you look at it. In contrast, in the case of Agola, the Agola, you of course are moving, and therefore it's less reason to be mitzdaref. ועל פי החילוק זה, כוסף בשעת שוב זה אור לציין, וכן דעת הגאון שמואל ווזנה, שיש הבדל בין האיכלים במכונית or באוטובוס לאיכלים במטוס. He therefore argues there's a difference between sitting in the back of a car or a bus and on a plane. שהאיכלים במכונית or באוטובus יזמנו בלא אזכר שם כאגולה. You treat it like the agola and you do a zimun of 10 without the Shem Hashem. מה שאין כן האיכלים במטוס, if you're on a plane, Mitzdarfin Gam Nasora, that does count. That's more of a tziruf on a plane. It's more like a ship, and it's the wind that's pushing you, but you're all considered together. Someone told me they're not, some time ago, they were on the plane back, and there was a Sheva Brachas. There was a couple who were traveling, I don't know where, from Eretz Yisrael to London or something, for the second half of the Sheva Brachas week, and they did a Sheva Brachas on the plane. And according to this, you can do a zimun, it's a kvias, with the Shem Hashem, the Varech Elokeinu. Ochein, hayoshvin le'echol b'rakevet, sheyesh b'shulchanos. You're on a train, and there are tables on the train, u'mokum marvach le'echol, there's plenty of place to eat. If you're on a train and there's tables and things like that, then for sure you can do it. It's mitzdaref and you can do a zimun properly. It's like in a house. So on a train, absolutely. On a plane, yes. A car and a wagon or something like that, then it is mesupuk. And therefore to do it without the Shem Hashem would be okay. Omnom b'mor, now listen to this, it's important. Omnom b'mor k'tzia kosov shakol tori b'shkitas nesiyosam. It all depends on the matzav, on how quiet it is. Bein b'yam or bein b'yabosha. Whether we're talking in air or on dry land and sea, doesn't make a difference. Ki acha kavonas halev hein dvarim. She'ba'agola hamisnadedes v'oifonea marishim shekosher lechaven. Taitem l'shmiya. The reason why the Magen Avraham was mesupik about a carriage is because you've got wild horses who are neighing and screaming, and the hooves are making a big noise. So therefore, it's hard to say that you're focused to do one tziruf. V'chein b'sfina k'sheish ruach sara. It's a turbulent ride. Ein mitzarfen lezimun. Ub'she'ein sara. But if there's no stormy weather, it's a leisure cruise. She'yoshim shakotzim mitzarfen lezimun. Then for sure you can be mitzaref. V'al pisvar zu kos v'apeis baruch. שהנוסעים ברכבת או במכונית וכל שכן במטוס מצטרפים לזימון וכן דעת רב שיינברג שמצטרפים כמובן ישן בספינה לא הספקתי אלא בעגולה. So it depends very much on the situation and again כשאיכם בעגולה עומדת the early Sion says it is mitzaref. So if you're on a car and you've pulled up, then for sure you're mitzaref. So it all depends on the matzav. In many situations, it's going to work because what the Chazal are describing are sort of very chaotic sort of travel arrangements. But nowadays, it's much easier to mitzaref the minyan. Let's just finish off the Ramah. Only a little piece. The Haminug says the Ramah shelo lezamen bebeis ovid kechovim, not to do a zimun in the house of a non-Jewish person. V'nirli atam says the Ramah mishum de lo yuchel likvei atzan kebeis ovid kechovim, because you can't sit bekvias there. Mishum yiras ha'ovid kechovim, you're scared. V'aviki'ilu below keva, and therefore your situation there is very transient. It's very temporary. You could be running away quickly. If you change from the nusach of the bracha, your host might be offended. He's a very knowledgeable non-Jewish host. And therefore, better to everyone do their own thing. And even if these reasons don't apply, and therefore, in a house of a non-Jewish person, he says not to do a zimun. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkot and Chavzayin, Shelo lezamin, ha'achronim cholkim al zeh. The achronim argue with this Ramah, and therefore nowadays you're in the house of a non-Jewish person or a non-Jewish hotel, you are mezamin. However, for the Rachman you say the following: Harachamon hu yishlach lanu beracha meruba b'halichusenu u'v'yoshivasenu ad olam. That's the Harachamon you say. V'nuchel loyma Harachamon yivarech es balabayis hazeh. V'koi al bala suda, the person who's running the suda, not necessarily the owner of this establishment. Mikol shkein im kol echad oichel mishalei she'oz afilu bebeis Yisrael omrim Harachamon yivarech esanu. You can say that. But if you're eating in a hotel by yom in the daytime, derech harai bebeis ovid gelulim she'efshad de'in zeh kfiyas ve'im mezamnin v'toiv shelo yikbu shloshin yachad v'yotzim this topic. Better not three people to go together. Let me very quickly just say the two interesting footnotes. Hachrozu bia nishmas Adam 25. Shehayu oimra al pi minagenu shekol echad mevorech la'atzmai v'chein mezamnin b'shleisha shezimun hu dov shevach ve'im b'chashash haskoros b'shem shemaim levatola. Okay, good. 26. V'chein ha'mevorech b'matos hashayach legoyim mekom siburim. You're in a park, you're in a place. What do you say? Harachman yishlach lanu b'roch b'bayis zeh v'shulchan zeh. What do you say? So you can say where there's a place where there's no balabayis mesuyim, no specific, could go in ginos or in a park or something like that. Kosa b'sefer chashukei chemed sheyem nesuch zeh. I.e., you say the Harachman yishlach b'roch meruba b'halichisenu u'v'yishivasenu ad olam. And then the last one in 27, ule'inyan ha'ichlin b'misada b'beis malon. He says, he quotes Rabbi Yashiv, sheyesh lehem lema harachman yivarech es balabayis hazeh. You can say that. Harachman yivarech es balabayis hazeh for the malon. You're paying for the meal in a restaurant. Afal pi she'em meshalmim al pi hasuda. Shokein in balabayis lo haya meichin lohem es hasuda lo haya oichlim achila zu v'kaspim lo haya maspia oisam. So therefore, it's appropriate to say it. Om l'gabi abrachim yuchedes the birchas hareach, that you don't say. You say the harachman yivarech es balabayis hazeh, but not the birchas hareach. Okay, we'll leave it there.